Hi folks, this is Professor Koenig, and I am talking about introducing communication theory, and we are now working on Chapter 12, which is still in the relationship component of the textbook, but this Chapter 12 is specifically about communication privacy management theory. And this is yet another, and I think all of these relationship theories are, I don't want to say they're simple or they're easy, but I think that they're very digestible to us as scholars and students, because we see them every day, and we see ourselves in them, and we see them in ourselves, and vice versa, and in our friends and family and relationships. And so CPM's communication privacy management theory is really about our privacy and how we consider our private information, what we consider private information on an individual level, right? Because we're all different. Some of us feel like our information should be shared. Some of us don't, right? This theory doesn't really get too much into introverts versus extroverts, but maybe that's a way to sort of consider it. Maybe that's a way for you to write a paper about this theory. That would be like a nice tie, I think. That's probably could use some scholarship. So CPM says disclosure in relationships requires managing private and public boundaries, and these boundaries are between those feelings that one wants to reveal and those who want to keep them private. And disclosure in relationship development is more than revealing private information to another, however. Negotiation and coordination of these boundaries is required. So what do I mean by that? So we say in social penetration theory, well, you start to, as you get closer to somebody and as you develop a relationship, you peel the layers back, right? Social penetration, that was the onion theory. But communication privacy management says it's not only about disclosure, it's about managing the boundaries. So who in my life am I allowed to share this private information with, and why do I share this private information? And there's some assumptions. Humans are choice makers. So what do we mean by that? Every day I make choices about what I want to share and what I don't want to share. And I will tell you from a personal perspective, I go on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, probably Facebook more because there's a little more space to post, and I'll write something, and then I'll say, I don't feel like sharing. I'm not sharing this. Why? Why? I mean, maybe you found this about yourself as well, or you share something and you're kind of like, why did I just say that? Why did I feel the need to like put that out there into the ether? And that's one of these ideas about CPM. Like, we make choices about what we want to share and what we don't want to share. We are rule makers and rule followers. So what are the rules that you have set up for yourself about sharing, and what are the rules that you think that about society or culture or within your relationships? So I have certain friends I share everything with. I have certain friends that I keep things a little more close to the chest. Why? Well, it's just a different relationship. We've set up relational rules differently. So they don't share as much with me, perhaps, so I don't share as much with them, perhaps. And maybe we have these breakthroughs, right? Because we say relationships aren't linear. We said that. We said relationships are always changing. They're dynamic, right? So sometimes you set up these rules within a relationship, and then one of you breaks the rules. And then you have to set up these new rules. But we are rule makers and we're rule followers. Humans' choice and rules are based on consideration of others. So if I have a friend who's keeps little things more closer to the chest, I might not share as much with that friend. I might feel like that friend doesn't appreciate it, or not in a bad way, but just like doesn't appreciate me putting pressure on them to disclose. So I sort of set up these rules, and I think about them in consideration for other people. We are considerate human beings, even when you don't think so. We are considerate. So what is private information? Because that's at the heart of this theory. Private information is information that matters, right? This is what matters to me. So what matters to you and what matters to me are very different, right? But we as human beings and as relational beings, there's some commonalities, right, of what matters and what we consider private information. Maybe about our family members, or maybe about money, or or jobs or our really true feelings. I mean, these are things that human beings tend to be consider private. Private disclosure is the process of communicating that information to another person. So I have, history with in my family that is private information to me, and there are certain people that I feel it's okay to disclose that with, and there are certain people that I don't think it's okay. And so some of these principles are tied to this information and how we manage this. So ownership, people believe they own information about themselves. It's mine, right? I know my childhood, and that's my information. If I want to share it, I will. If I don't, I won't, because I'm in control. And people develop boundaries to control their personal information. So again, sharing on Instagram or Facebook, I have this private, I own this information, and then I have control. I can click that submit button, or I can say delete. I'm not sharing that. There's rules of what I think is okay to share and what is not okay to share, and it depends on the setting, right? It always depends on context. On Facebook, I sometimes don't share as much. On Twitter, I share a little bit more, or like I share a little more about my ideologies and things like that, because I have different sort of group of people that I tweet at versus my Facebook. I got a lot of family members and some old students, and I just don't think it's appropriate. I've set up these rules for myself, right? Co-ownership. Others become co-owners of your information. So if I share with you on Facebook about something about me, can you then share it out to your friends? You can, right? I put it out there, so would I have the right to get mad at you if you shared information about me with others? Well, I might, but then I put it out there, so I have to sort of think about the boundaries. And the private boundaries are these that marks, right? So if you tag me a photo of me when we were out together, and I don't like that you tagged it because now the boundary's gotten larger, right? Now I'm tagged with your friends. What do? I untag myself, right? Because I say you have stepped over the boundary, and I don't like that, and I feel uncomfortable. Turbulence is what happens when you tag me in a photo, and I was like, why didn't you ask me if you could tag me? Do you know those people who say, is it okay if I tag you in a photo? And you're like, yeah, duh, of course you can. Well, some people get really upset about it, right? And you've been probably there in that time where somebody has tagged you in a photo and you've been like, no, please don't do that without asking me, right? So that's sort of like the boundaries. And we have this like boundary, sort of a lifespan of boundaries. Think about as a child, some of the boundaries that you have, does that change when you get into adolescence and when you get into adult? We have very different boundaries, right? Kids have like no filter. Think about that. Like they just sort of tell you everything that's going on with them. We get into adolescence, we start to like, that changes a little bit. Adults, we have like our boundaries sort of expand and they become, but they also become a little more controlled because we know ourselves a little bit better. And there's other rules that we have set up as a culture. So the book gets into this idea of like, well, we haven't talked about culture too much yet in this class, but we'll get into it later on in the textbook. But certain cultures, the United States of America, are a little more open than a culture like Japan, perhaps, where they keep things a little bit closer. We are more direct. We have autonomy in the United States of America as like a foundation of our cultural norms. And so that's, I'm me, I'm direct, I tell you how I feel, so maybe I'm a little more open and my communication boundaries or my privacy boundaries are a little more open or porous, perhaps. I don't mind when things spread out. Gender. So men versus women, right? Women have this tendency to like to share. They like to develop relationships on, I don't want to say closer than men do, but in a sense, women tend to be closer and disclose more than men do. And that's a gender criteria, gender rule set up first for CPM. Risk. So our rules are influenced by our assessment of the ratio of risks. So we set up rules for ourselves and our relationships based on this ratio of like, well, what's going to happen if I share? So think about your colleagues at work. What do you share with them at work? And have you ever been afraid, like, oh shoot, why did I just say that? That is like, that's going to get out there and then I'm going to get in trouble or fired, right? I mean, we've all read, I think, these stories about people who share, called in sick today on Facebook. Now I'm like hanging at the beach. Why'd you share that, right? There's ramifications, there's risks that are possible when we share information, we put it out there. And I'm talking a lot about social media with respect to this chapter because I think our private information is changed. What we consider private is changed. I had a really interesting conversation with somebody recently about food and eating as private. So you go on Instagram, how many hundreds of pictures of people's food do you see? And that's a new thing. There was a long time where like your Friday night dinner out, like that was between you and the people you were eating dinner with. And now we have this need to like, look what I ate for dinner on Friday night. I think it's a very interesting phenomenon from a communication theory perspective. Why do we share pictures of our food? Where did that come from? Yeah, so I invite you to think about how social media has blurred some of these privacy lines. And when I say privacy, I'm not so much talking about we've got passwords and they get hacked into and things like that, but like the information that we readily give out there to others. And why do we do that? And how has the boundaries changed over the years? And that really talks about communication privacy management theory. If you have questions on this, please let me know. And I always want to hear from you. And there you go.